Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Hey, well, thank you, Sean, so much for that great introduction. So we have a special guest here today. I've been talking to him on Facebook for quite some time, but we have Jason Petho, whose game, Campaign Games Vietnam, is coming out, I believe, on Thursday, the 20th. This is going to go out on the 18th, by the way, just in case anybody that's listening needs to know what day it is. Welcome, Jason. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Mitch. Nice
No,
to meet
I'm
you, talk with you.
Yeah, as well. Paolo was so excited about this. So,
Oh, that's
you,
good.
so you're joining us from Terrace, British Columbia. I had to look it up on the map yesterday. You're kind of up there. I was going to ask what the weather is like up there.
Today it is actually a beautiful sunny day. It's around freezing, but it's still beautiful and sunny. There's
Thank you
snow on
for
the ground, and it's been raining off and on the last few days, unfortunately.
thank you for not saying Celsius because people would have to see me do math
Yep.
in public.
Yeah.
So tell us about this game.
So it is called the Campaign Series Vietnam, 1948 to 1967. And it's a tactical operational game that focuses on the mid 20th century conflicts in Southeast Asia. And that includes the French in Indochina, the Civil War in South Vietnam prior to the American involvement, and then the American involvement from 1965 to 1967.
So I got a mid beta copy, and I got a copy of it today. So I was actually playing one of the Beatrice scenarios. And well, first of all, let's just go back with a little history. Um, these games have been around for some time. The original series, because I remember playing them back in the '90s.
Yeah.
What's your experience with the series?
The first game came out in '97, if I recall correctly. That was the original East Front by Talonsoft. Um, I didn't get involved into this series. I bought it right away because at the time, I was playing Steel Panthers and I was looking for something that was, a little more free flowing so I could do more editing of scenarios and things like that. And East Front came along with that isometric 3D view, and it's like, oh, I totally fell in love. And the editors involved just kept me passionate with the thing for years. I didn't get involved until West Front, the Sea Lion expansion. I started creating some maps of England, the southeast coast of England, for a campaign that I was building. And eventually that turned into a product that was available from Talonsoft, and did some other testing and whatnot for Talonsoft before they sold the game. That was, I think they sold it to Take Two back in the day.
Yes. Hmm.
And then after that, Matrix got their hands on the code and asked me if I would take over developing it. So that's what I've been doing ever since 2006, I believe. Somewhere in there
Wow.
anyway.
So there's also the Arab Israeli version. What's that? Divided Ground, I believe.
Yeah. So Divided Ground was a game that came out by, it was Take Two, a Take Two game. And one of our tasks was to, once we took it over from Matrix, was to rebuild that game. And so we scrapped that whole game and rebuilt it from the ground up. New graphics, new order of battles, new scenarios, everything was brand new. The engine at the time is still similar, although we did some modifications to it. And with each progressive upgrade, we have been updating it as well. Uh, we did release 2000 or 2.0 2019, I believe,
I believe.
and
Yep.
then we will be releasing 3.0, which will bring that game up to Vietnam standards, probably later this year or early next year.
That's exciting in itself.
It is really. So if you like to play the Middle East, then yeah, stay tuned for that to be upgraded. And there's
I,
so many new and exciting features within Vietnam that'll make that Middle East game, just like you're playing a whole new game completely. I'm beyond excited about it. Pardon me.
I can tell. So that 2.0 I thought was amazing. Um, it really upgraded that engine, and you were able to look at have a 2D view with counters, which some of us old grog heads really kind of dig. It was such a massive upgrade, and I wish there was like more buzz about it. Um, but I think it was around 2020 when I was going through the forums that I saw the Vietnam game. Um, what motivated you to start that project? What about Vietnam said we got to make a game about this?
Well, it all started with a mod to the original campaign series game by George Grillo. And initially, we actually planned on doing Vietnam before we were going to do Middle East. But Vietnam is such a complicated affair at the engine level that we decided, okay, let's stick with Middle East and we'll focus on that, get the engine built up, and then return to Vietnam and do it right instead of trying to rush something out the door. Um, so we did that, and now that if you played 2.0, you would have noticed that some of the scenarios have incorporated the new AI abilities with the campaign series event engine. That's the core of all the upgrades that we've been doing for the last at least 5 years. We started with the 2.0 and added a handful of functions that, hey, this is what the AI can do if you script it. But now we're well over 800 functions to improve how the AI plays, and it's brilliant, utterly brilliant about what it can do. Of
So
course, it's not a learning AI by any means, but it's a scripted AI, and you can script it to do literally anything you want, which is fascinating. It's great. It makes gameplay so much more interesting.
So I noticed that when playing this, and I also noticed one of the when you pick your game parameters, one of them it says something about adaptive learning or adaptive AI. Love
Right.
to hear about that for so many reasons.
The adaptive AI is a way to make the nations feel more unique. Um, there's 150 different parameters, a little over 150 different parameters that adjust how an American Marine platoon is different than an Arvan infantry platoon, for example. And that can be the idea behind that is that every nation is different, the training is different, how they react under combat is different. So we try and have all these different parameters to help make it feel like you're playing the country that you're actually playing. Um, of course, it's moddable, so if you don't agree with how we've set things up, you can change it to however you wish.
I'm just going to ask a question that's I'm dying to ask. How hard was it to do that? Because you had this game, you've been teasing pictures for years now. How hard was it to do that? How hard was it to do the entire game as well?
Well, this has been an ongoing thing for 10 years. It's a big game. I mean, we initially intended to have the game cover literally everything from 1948 to 1979. But that scope, we've had to change the scope because it's just too big. It was way too big. Um, the scenarios, it would have, you're looking at a couple hundred scenarios at that point, and scripting and testing and continually testing, updating. With the scripting, finding new things to make the scripting easier, so everyone could, if they want to design their own scenarios, that we have to get to the point where the scripting is not too complicated that someone could do it on their own if they wanted to. Yeah, so we had to cut back to 1967. We figured that would be a good point to cut it back to, that we're still providing you 100 scenarios, 108 scenarios, I believe,
Yes.
altogether, which is fantastic. I mean, that's thousands of hours of play, really. Call me crazy, but yeah.
Oh,
Um,
we're not going to call you crazy. It was funny. One of the Facebook groups I'm on, it was somebody dropped an article about how many games have you played for 500 hours. So I commented, how many in this group haven't?
That's true. That is true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the playability of the game is amazing. Now, I haven't played it long enough to see how that scripting works, but now that I know it's out there, you better believe I'm definitely going to check that one out.
And for
So,
sure, and for a lot of the scenarios that I designed, depending on the situation of the scenario, because there's only so many things that you can do in 20 turns, for example. At least for variety, I did give a lot of the companies uh, a die roll, for example, where it would choose one, two, or three options and then continue its mission from there. So the replayability at for every company is going to be different, right? So you never know what really you kind of know what's going to happen, but you don't know how it's going to happen, right?
what about this game series you think has given it such long legs for well over 25 years and still popular where there was a desire to put out more games?
I think uh, the simplicity, for one thing. It's a really simple game to play. We've made it much more difficult in the sense that you have to think a lot more. But generally speaking, it's a really simple game to play. And not only that, it comes with a full suite of editors that if you like to tinker, you can tinker your heart out totally and do whatever you wish. You can make your own scenarios, you can make your own maps, you can make your own order of battles. The game is generally fully moddable. You can make it to whatever you want. If you don't like the way that we've done a graphic for a tank, you could change it if you want. If you want to
Wow.
add new tanks, you can do that if you want. We provide you, for example, with the map editor, we provide you a whole bunch of historical master maps that you can use for your own scenarios. Tweak them as you want, do whatever you want with them. I mean, yeah. There's so many, and just the amount of play that you can get out of this. For example, the a weekend scenarios, they will take you to sit and play them through properly. Oh, 500 hours by itself, really, especially the
What?
bin long scenario. It is a lot. And we're continually updating things as well. Um, Participate in the forum, take a look at the forum as the game goes on. We'll be releasing updates for you to make sure that you have the latest and greatest because it's a living game. And our series is really a living series.
It is. And most people that are listening now say this is why Mitch likes it because he doesn't have to think. Uh, Moddable. How important now for a game, especially with the crowd of grognards that are out there, how important do you feel it's to have a moddable game on the market?
I think it is very important because it provides options for people. And people they like to tinker, and we provide the opportunity for them to tinker. Even in the manual, we explain how to do that to encourage people to do it. And we're happy to host mods as well, either in the game official, like for example in Middle East 2.0, we included some user mods because they were great. And hey, why not? If you want to use them, they're there. We
Yeah,
plan on
that
doing the same with Vietnam as well.
Yeah, that is one of the neat things. I think for a game to be marketable, I've never modded a game, but I've downloaded so many mods, and I think it's just important. But with 108 scenarios and one that you said it's going to take 500 hours, I don't think I'm going to grow bored of the game for me to try modding my first game. But I still think that that's pretty amazing. And what you said with the mods with the Arab Israeli game, I think that's awesome. It keeps me going back to those forums, and every once in a while somebody will throw out, "Hey, does anybody want to test this out?" I think that's awesome because it has that community of games of gamers that I think is just so important because then we could talk about the games. How did you do in this scenario? Um, how did you overcome this challenge? So I think that's just so important, and it's really kind of neat that Vietnam is also so 108 scenarios. Um, why those 108? And were there any that could have made the list that you were, maybe we should just add one more?
Oh, I have a list of scenarios that I didn't have time to complete that for scripting wise because it takes so long to script and to test them. So there's a series of scenarios that were intended to be included with this release, but we just didn't have time to finish them. Um, Again, we had cutting things down to a reasonable amount, which at 108 is that reasonable? I don't know. It's could be crazy depending on how you talk to. But yeah, there are additional scenarios that I really wish that I wanted to include, but we might release those at a later date for free or whatever. We will be having DLCs later on, which will expand the series from 1968 to 1968 to 1979, and those will cover obviously the Tet Offensive, um, the Easter Offensive, the fighting between China and Vietnam in '79, the fall of Saigon, etc. So there will be more coming. Most of those will probably be DLCs, as well as the fighting in Laos and Cambodia, which is exciting in itself. Something different, something new. We're
So you're
really
going
trying to make this a very comprehensive game for Vietnam at this level, at the tactical and slash operational level.
so you're going to be doing the China
Yes.
um, slash Vietnam. So I know a ton of people that will buy the game just on that because other than Brief Border Wars by I think was it Brian Tran? Brian Tran, who doesn't live very far from you. He's a
No,
British Columbia guy too. It is just never covered, and it's probably such an interesting um, conflict that is just not gamed enough.
no, you're right, and there's a lot of potential for the platoon level scale that we're using at. It's tough fighting, let me tell you. Yeah, it'll be challenging to. There's a lot of units in a small area, but that in itself is kind of fun and exciting, and how you're going to deal with a Chinese incursion, and yeah, interesting. So many
So,
options.
so with this project, you could have gone in so many different versions that are out there. Um, Maybe trying to get back to an early question. Why Vietnam? Is there something that you have a connection, or I love reading about certain aspects of Vietnam, so I'm excited about it. But as you started to flesh this out, what about Vietnam said this needs a game in this engine?
Uh, I could see that the value with the engine, and there's not very many games at this particular scale that deal with Vietnam. Having the opportunity to, you know, I'm a huge his, you know, amateur historian, and I really enjoy 20th century conflicts, and Vietnam was one of those pivotal ones. That's always had my interest. I've always been keen on learning about it. My library at home has a case dedicated to Vietnam, essentially. So there's an inherent interest to, you know, represent all the things that I've been reading and try and make something that is interesting for the players to experience on their own. Um, each of the scenarios, one thing about the scenarios as you're reading through the descriptions, you'll see that um, there's a lesson to be learned in each of the scenarios that I'm portraying. Some of the key battles we didn't do because they were so lopsided. So we tried to focus on battles that had historical meaning to them, in the sense that there's something to learn, and both sides kind of had a realistic chance of winning on both sides, right? You'll see it's also a good training tool in a way to get you thinking tactically as well as operationally, because on our operational level you're worried about logistics for certain scenarios, especially the a weekend series. You're worried about getting things completed, finishing your mission, dealing with the unexpected enemy, whatever they're going to do, who knows. um it's, I feel like I'm babbling, sorry.
No, 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 no. I'm going to let you go. And it kind of brings me to one of my favorite questions. What books? Well, I'll ask it in two parts. What books in your historical research for this is a book that you haven't that you didn't read before that you felt helped you out the most? And what books did you constantly find yourself going back to because there was so much good information? Because I think all of our readers, yeah, they're gamers, but they're also historians. Um, any interesting books that's probably not on my bookshelf, but I got Amazon.com open right now, so I'm going to order whatever you tell me.
Well, if you're curious about Order of Battles, the Vietnam Order of Battle book by Stanton, fantastic. Love it. It is so you and it helped me so much with building the American Order of Battles. Um, the the historical series from the U.S. military, I don't recall what they are off the top of my head. Those are invaluable books to read through. They give you a tone for the operations that were happening. A lot of the battles that were mentioned within there are represented within the game. Um, what else? Let me ponder and look at my bookshelf. 1 second.
Yeah,
State of Joy, definitely
good
recommended.
book.
Yeah. Uh, the other one that's
And we got you breaking up a little bit, but
yeah. Sorry, 1 second. 1 second.
and this is me. I should have prepared better for this. Or usually we don't give out. I get asked all the time, "What questions are you going to ask?" I go, it's better when it's a free flowing conversation. So I should have put this one up there beforehand. The thing is, if I don't get to it, it's one of those things where, well, he didn't ask me that yet. So
Yeah. There's there's a there's so many books. Unbelievable. Um,
So, so some of the recent Vietnam books I got Paven, which covers from you know the eyes and thoughts of the North. I thought that was a great book because as
yeah,
soon as knew this game was coming out, you know, for me, what I'm reading is driven by what I'm gaming. I thought that was a pretty good book. How hard was it to get the North Vietnamese? Yeah, it's one of the three words I cannot say that in prognostication. To get North Vietnam's order of battle, especially the Viet Cong.
difficult. There's so many sources and so many of them are conflicting. It's quite difficult to narrow down. I tried. I did my best to show which units were active in the particular battle that we are talking about. But yeah, it is one of the most difficult things that I've ever come across is trying to nail down those type of order of battles. And we try and do as historical as possible, right? Uh, Same with the unit types, same with the weapons that were there, the maps obviously, and the tempo of the battle as well. We try and keep it quite historical. Sometimes I win, sometimes I don't.
Well, we do have folks in Vietnam that download this podcast.
Oh,
It's
good.
because the internet doesn't have any secrets. So please contact us at No Dice No Glory if you want to add at it, and get in touch with Jason.
For
Um,
sure. It is a living game, and we are happy to update mistakes that have been made or just to improve it in general.
yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I've played it a bunch of times. It's such a good product now that I just can't see improving it. But then again, I'm not. I don't have the design chops that you have whatsoever. Um, when you guys were playtesting the game, what, in your opinion, was the most fun scenario and why?
Most fun scenario. That's a good question.
Yeah, we have to ask
Probably,
one per podcast.
probably for me, it would be the Battle of Minthan Road, which is a historical battle, obviously on the Minthan Road, where the Americans had kind of lured a regiment into to set up an ambush where they could then counterattack using an armored cavalry unit as well as some infantry to surround them. And I've tried to do that with the scenario. So you're taking command of the armored cavalry regiment that's going to be engaging the forces. And yeah, it's an interesting scenario. It's fun for me because you have, a lot of armored vehicles, you have some air support, you have infantry, you have a lot of artillery, and it's just a matter of going out, hunting them down, and seeing how it works out. It's for me, it's a fun scenario. I also
Uh,
played the Battle of Atback, the 1963. I don't know if you saw that
uh,
on our YouTube page. Just
mhm.
a few days ago, actually, I played it, and oh, what a difference! It's an interesting scenario. It's a challenging scenario. It is winnable because I've won it before, but just this time I was having really bad die rolls and I just couldn't get there. Couldn't get there to the things that I wanted to do.
We'd all be
For
amazing gamers if the dice cooperated with us.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you which one I like the most, and I'm going to tell you the lesson I learned from it. I believe it's one of the LZ X-ray scenarios where you actually have to establish the landing zone. And one of the things I think I mentioned to you when we first started chatting is the distance involved in getting to it. But then I took, and I should have told you about this afterwards. Then I took a step back and played it again, and I put my day job hat on, and I realized that you show one of the problems of vertical envelopment and the air mobile doctrine in 1965, which is you're only as good as your mobility, and reaching that LZ and getting reinforcements out there is such a time crunch in that game that while I listed it as something like, maybe this was a limb fact, I realized from the teaching aspect that you hit it right on. And I even used that not too long ago in a my day job, explaining about, you know, look, your LZ is the lifeline, and your fire base, is well, your fire base is the lifeline to that LZ, and trying to get there with those forces to reinforce because the enemy's coming for you is such a great lesson, a tactical lesson that you can take from that game. And look, there was a famous movie made about it. Maybe that's why I played it. It was one of the
Right.
first I played,
Yeah.
and a great book, even better book. Um, that it teaches a lesson in: do I overextend myself here? How can I win this? This is not easy. And I thought that that was just so impressive. I was so impressed with that game afterwards. And I know you and I went, traded some text messages or IM messages about it. And I should have gotten back to you to say that is probably one of the most interesting scenarios you want to play to see how air mobile operations worked in that part of the because it's tense. It
Yeah.
is so tense.
Once you're being attacked and trying to keep your line and your landing zone intact so you can bring in your extra companies, as with the limitations of the amount of helicopters that you have. One, you have to be careful not to lose any of them, and two, yeah, trying to ferry them as fast as you can back and forth, keeping in mind that you need to refuel. You need to make sure that your helicopters are fully capable. You have to make sure that your gunships are, you're rotating them in and out to make sure that you always have some heavy fire support when you need it, because you will need it in that particular scenario. Absolutely.
I kept screaming out a fart, my kingdom, because the distance in that really shows you the tenseness of the battle, which the book alludes to. The movie doesn't at all, but I
Right.
think the game hits it perfectly. And to me, it is one of the most interesting and, dare I say, fun scenarios. And if you want to learn, I think it's amazing. So I have a lot of folks that are just they're interested in two things. One of them is what can I learn from this game? And I bring up the LZ X-ray scenario.
Yeah.
The other one is, are you covering some of the more obscure stuff in the war? And you answered that one already, because I know folks that said, well, if you're going to cover China, Vietnam, if you're going to cover some of these more obscure things, I'm in. I'm getting this game. So they're excited. So as soon as this is finished, I'm going to start telling people about
For
it.
sure. Even
So
for how many games do you know of that deal with the Civil War between the American involvement and the French? Not many.
none.
Yeah, we have about 20 odd scenarios that deal just specifically with that.
And I
And
was going to ask, what motivated you guys to include that? Because nobody includes that.
for me, I find it interesting. It's an interesting transition between, the World War II-ish tactics that you were experiencing with the French there, and the slow introduction of helicopters. Before the Americans came in and with their division, you had the utility transport company that the Americans had sent over, which you get to play with. First things first, in I think it's 63, 62, 62, I think, around Saigon. Uh, and seeing how things progressed and seeing why the Americans came, because things weren't going very well for the Arvin. So it was interesting to be able to portray that and show, this is the situation on the ground in the early 60s, or even to start of the rebellion. Fascinating, just fascinating things. And
Now I'm excited.
lots of tactical lessons to learn there, for sure.
Yeah.
Like Outback, that was a disaster for me. I mean, for them too,
Yeah.
but still.
And it's I didn't realize it that so much was included in the game until I think I downloaded it today and looked through it and played some of it. Just the fact that you include all the battles with the French, I find that so interesting. I have two DNB and Foo games on my shelf that I'm pointing to that nobody can see. I think it's such an interesting part of the war, and there's still books coming out about it. I think I read what Valley of Sar. There was a book that just came out 2 years ago on it, and I just think it's fascinating to read about how the the French with our backing got beaten in that war. Ours is in the United States, not Canada.
Yeah.
Um, and then you start to think about the lesson and takeaway from that book is, well, why did we get involved when the French didn't do as well as we hoped they would?
Right.
Um, I found that so interesting, and I'm so glad that you have that well covered in the game. I believe there's a good about what a third of the scenarios, maybe a quarter, just deal with.
Or there's 25 scenarios that deal with the French in Indochina. 10 of those are dealing with Dien Bien Phu. Again, we do have more planned to include with that, but just didn't have time to complete, unfortunately. Even though we've been working on this for so long, so long. Uh,
With 25 scenarios, I think that I'll buy the DLC as soon as it comes out. It's definitely a must have in the collection. I don't think I'll get through those 25 scenarios by the time this comes out.
oh, you might, because it's addicting. Once you start getting in there, it's addicting. It really is.
It is such an addicting game. Uh, the series always was. So in the past 4 versions of this game, because we have Pacific, West Front, East Front, Arab Israeli, which is the one that you became addicted to the most and fell in love with this game engine?
East Front, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of the Eastern Front, World War II, and I love designing big scenarios for the East Front because you have the space there to do all these wonderful things with the Eastern Front, and we will be doing East Front 3 probably next year as a starting point, 1939 to 1941. Um, I've been interested in the fighting around Smolensk as well as
Hmm.
Kiev and Operation Blau. Oh, just so many exciting things that I want to do and need to take time to start building and whatnot. We do have a quasi beta already for East Front 3, but we just need content, lots and lots of content, and that content takes time to build the scenarios, to test them, to script them, etc. So as soon
So
as
if
we
we
have content, we'll get her out there.
so if we have any aspiring content play testers, they should also get in touch with Jason. The East Front to me, I like playing it because it is a war of annihilation, and the game always did that well. The aesthetics, though, of the game in the previous version for those East Front tank slogs are amazing because you have the burning tanks with the smoke all over the battlefield, and you're trying to maneuver to have your bigger tanks, no matter what side you're on, take out the enemy's bigger, harder killing tanks. It is just such a great game. Even some of the Stalingrad scenarios where it's a tight-in infantry fight are just so addictive, and it's one of those games where you're like, just one more turn.
Yeah, 2 hours later.
Right. Uh, because you could get yourself lost in this game engine. And with Vietnam playing LCX right now, many a time, um, I've spent yeah, it's 8 o'clock at night. I'll play a couple while the game's on or something. And then it's late show. I'm like, did I just spend 3 hours sitting here? 4 hours sitting here playing the game. You really can get yourself lost in it, which is not a reason not to buy it. It just means it's that much fun. And I think games that challenge you, that really say you're not going to beat me today, I think are amazing games when they're well done. And this series is so well done, and the previous ones are as well. And Vietnam is just looking, and I'll we're going to do an article on this too. Just go look at the screenshots. Like those maps, some of them are huge and they're beautiful. I think that is a beauty of this game because if you want it for just a straight up fight and you just want to have some fun, game is perfect. If you want to take some lessons away, the game is also excellent at that. So few games really can strike a balance between the two.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
that
Right.
I just think like what did I ask you before we got on? Make sure I don't sound too much like a fanboy. And you're like, you know, hey, you hope you don't. I'm like, well, you're the creator designer uh, for this. So 10 years. What was the biggest challenge in the research? But it sounded like from talking earlier, it's coding.
Yeah.
How
Um, so yeah, the game looks familiar to the old games for sure. Absolutely it does. Because if it ain't fixed, why break it?
right?
Just continue it. But under the hood, it's changed completely. And with that, um, the AI acts completely different than anything that you've played before with the campaign series. It's not that game anymore. Not only that, you as the player have a lot more things to think about now. Um, the fog of war, for example, has been significantly changed. I think improved. It makes it a far more realistic experience. Um, the line of sight checks, spotting checks, the new air model. But yeah, the most time consuming thing was we we got the Vietnam game to the CSME 2.0 stage. It's like, okay, we're happy with how this works, but what can we do to improve it? And from 2018 until now, we've been literally taking the engine and putting it on its head and rebuilding it and making it better and rebuilding it and making it better and improving how the Lua scripting functions within the game and how it interacts with the player. The game is so much more involved. You know, you need to follow the missions. You need to complete the missions in order to win a scenario. Uh, you don't know what the mission objectives are for the opposing player. You can guess, but are they going to be the same as yours? No, not necessarily. Why should they be? You know, before the game was strictly objective based. Now it's not objective based. I mean, there's still objectives on the map just because people are used to that. But is that the only thing that you're going to be going for now? No, not at all.
It's not.
Absolutely
It's
not.
And one of the things for folks out there that have not played the game before, it's not Gary Grigsby's War in the East. And that I think is another beauty of this game is there's a lot under the hood. And that's a term I love using. But as the player, you definitely need to know how the engine works. And I think Jason just said in the maze, you got to know what the objectives are. But the interaction that you have is minimal, where you need to make the decisions and then use the user interface to pull them out, execute them on the map. But it's not a lot of Gary Grigsby type, War in the East, where this is a monster game. I'm never going to get through this. There's too
No,
much to do. If these guys eat, I don't care. It's easy to play. How hard was it to keep the under the hood from not interfering with the player interaction?
by keeping it simple. It's basically a move and shoot type game, right? But the thought processes behind how am I going to do that? What am I being concerned with? You know, is everything going to still be in range? But you're not counting bullets, right? You're not counting, oh, okay, my tanks are throwing tracks, etc., etc. It's still simple because of the scale, but it's complicated, far more complicated in the sense that there's a lot more thinking involved. How am I going to complete my objectives with the tools that I have? How am I going to prevent the enemy from completing their objectives, even though I don't know what they are? How, with the fog of war, you can't see anything until you stumble upon it, right? Or get shot at, or vice versa. It's a simple game, but it's complicated. If that makes any sense. Makes
Oh,
perfect sense to me. But
believe it or not, makes perfect sense to me. So as you scroll through the 108 scenarios or missions that you can play in the game, sometimes you just blow past some of them. What is a hidden gem in the game that you just think gamers should just check out for an amazing experience, other than the ones we mentioned?
um, that's a good question.
Well, two per podcast. I think it's all we're
Yeah.
allowed. Because I definitely want to try some of the Civil War ones now from talking to you. I didn't
Yeah, for sure.
realize that it was in the game. As I went through it, and I usually sort the scenarios chronologically, so I can kind of get into the sweet spot of the era I want to play, and then I look at size based on how much time I think I have or want to dedicate. Um, but you end up going through a lot of them and say, because I can say for the four previous iterations of the game, I haven't played all of them.
Right, of course.
I mean,
For To answer your question, I would try from the Viet Cong perspective. It's a scenario called the Ben Tray Rebellion. And so you're effectively starting the game with a series of civilian-esque units, and you're supposed to go and attack a series of local offices, district offices. And every time you're successful at that, you'll be rewarded either with higher supply or you'll gain some more weapons, thereby giving you some Viet Cong platoons. Uh, with the ultimate objective is to attack the city of Maokai. Maokai, something like that. I don't remember. Pardon me butchering the name.
fine.
Um, But yeah, it's a fascinating scenario in the sense that you're starting with nothing, but for every time that you achieve one of the objectives, you gain more things to help you with your overall mission. I think it's a hidden gem. I think it's a fantastic idea for playing. And it gives you the what it feels like to yeah, just start a rebellion with nothing and gain more things as you're continuing.
You, sir, just ruined the rest of my night.
You're
And
welcome.
what's it called again? App
Entray Rebellion.
Entray Rebellion. It is getting.
I think it's 1958 or 1959, somewhere in there.
I am definitely playing. I'm typing it down now. So I am definitely going to play it. I just need to spell it right, but I think I'll
Yeah.
find it. Just
I'm gonna double check. Wait 1 second. Since I can do that. 1 second. Give me 1 second. I will tell you for sure what it is. Yeah,
now,
it's an interesting scenario. Something different.
and these are not all solo games. Some of them we can play head to head.
Actually, yeah, you can play some of them head to head for sure. There are tournament scenarios included, and they deal with these are the only hypothetical scenarios included in the game, and they deal with a potential uh, US versus China conflict, whereas the idea was that China had come into South Vietnam to help stabilize, and then the Marines are now moving in to remedy the situation.
What year?
1967.
Okay, you probably said that, and I was so excited when you were talking about it. I skipped right over it.
So
Um,
in in that sense, because they are tournament scenarios, they're not designed for playing against the computer. You need a human opponent to play the other side because the AI is not scripted in those scenarios because that's not what they're for. They're designed for head-to-head play. If the
you
yeah,
know, I so the game previously has had head-to-head scenarios, and I think I plugged one in by accident many years ago, and I go,
yeah,
"Why am I doing so well here?" And I realized that there was no scripting for the other side.
right. It For the vast majority of the scenarios, you will want to play as the free world force, which is typically side A, because side B is being scripted. That's just for 1.0. Eventually, we'll take the time to update these scenarios to have it so that hopefully both sides get scripted. Depends on priorities, etc. Or if interest. There's no interest, there's no sense doing it. Yeah, but yeah, typically side A, if you play side A, you'll have a good experience, with the exception of Ben Trey Rebellion, Battle of Mo Kai. That's the one that you want. And it's 1960, January 1960.
All right, I'm going to be playing these for the next few days. If nobody hears from me, now you know. Now you know what I'm up to. Yeah, it's such a great game system. I'm gushing because I waited for a while to for them to kind of add more to this series, and just looking at the forum on Matrix Games, which I please hit that forum. It's amazing. What are some things that folks in the community threw up throughout that really said, that's something I want to think about? I've read a lot of what folks posted, and a lot of it is, look, man, if you want to do it, you can mod it on your own. But what are some great ideas you got from the community?
Mainly scenario content. Um, just we want to build things that people want to play. So we have some Australians that are in the forum and they want to play Long Ten. So we made that scenario for them.
I
Um,
know.
which I don't, I did my first live Twitch stream for playing the game. I played that and I was slaughtered terribly. Oh my goodness, I felt so bad. Oh, it
Well,
was
you've
a
seen the movie that they made about
I
it,
know.
right?
I didn't hold out, let me tell you. I was assaulted, surrounded, and destroyed. It was a unfortunately, that didn't get recorded. Ah, it's too bad. So next time I
Yeah.
play that, hopefully I'll do better. Wow, that was brutal. But yeah, anyways, yeah, people's feedback, we look at it, we write it down. We've done surveys and whatnot before, and we keep everything that people say and either try and implement or put it into a future wish list or something like that. Yeah,
So,
for
yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
No. So let's say somebody out there is listening that is not familiar with the series, um, but they're a diehard groghead. What is something that we could say to them that will attract them to pick up a copy of this game and just give it a try that we haven't said already?
There's multiple views. So if you want to have that board game feel, you can put it in one of the 2D views and it looks like you're playing a board game. It's quite fascinating. But if you want to have that tabletop experience, you can put it in a 3D isometric view and play Vietnam like you're playing on a board on a tabletop. That's the inspiration was, I think it was Panzer Blitz back in the day when the
Yes.
original East Front came out, right? So yeah, that it keeps the board game roots, but there's no mess to clean up.
Which is a question we usually get to at the beginning. Tell us about your history of playing war games, computer or board games. What was that first game that hooked you in? That said, this is something I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And what are some of your favorites?
Let's see. My first computer war game was Conflict in Vietnam, ironically enough. Back in the
Oh,
day,
I remember
Conflict.
that one.
Yeah, that was the computer that I had. Unfortunately, though, I would only be able to play the first 3 turns, no matter what. Just it wouldn't run it. I tried many times, but it just didn't have the memory or whatever to run that game, unfortunately. But I kept it forever. Um, After that, board games, I've been playing, the typical. I started with Risk and then go to Axis and Allies, and then you know transitioned into different war games after that. Um, I
You could throw some
focused.
names out. Believe it or not, those guys listen to this. So
I was a big fan of the Panzer Blitz. I liked looking at the counters. I like playing with the maps, and so
hmm
East Front was a natural transition for that for me, which was great. The main thing why I stuck mostly with computer gaming is one space. I was moving around a lot. I didn't want to bring a whole bunch of things with me, uh, and I liked being creative. So even with the Steel Panthers, I was able to do some editing. But once the campaign series came available with East Front, the tools that were included with that were fantastic for scenario design. And we've continually upgraded the options within, improving the map editor, improving the organizational editor, making the scenario editor more useful. Yeah,
one of our
just
one of our writers just finished doing a series of articles on Steel Panthers. Believe it or not, never played it because there were so many other good games out there I really like playing. But it is, it's, it seems to be an iconic game that I guess I missed out on all the fun. Um, speaking of Panzer Leader, Panzer Blitz, I think one of the first 5 games I got was Panzer Leader.
oh
That's
yeah.
before I learned my love of every West Front and Arab-Israeli War, and I was able to get, believe it or not, from somebody hearing me talk about it on a podcast. They sold me an unpunched copy of Arab-Israeli Wars for $20.
What?
Um, yes,
That's amazing.
yeah, so once again, big thanks to that user. I don't want to mention his name, but that was awesome. I still have it because it's such a great game, and it's a classic. And I
Yeah.
think the series is such a good classic. But I want to get back to something that appears on the splash screen, and something you alluded to earlier. You dedicate the game to John Tiller, who recently passed away.
Yes.
Um, I've talked to so many of his developers, and believe it or not, just a few months before he passed, I was work. He never did a lot of interviews. I was working to get an interview with him, and we wrote an in memoriam for him that his brother actually thanked us for running. Um, what what was it? Your relationship with him, and what was it like working for John Tiller, who's iconic in computer games?
I only had very limited conversations with John. And most of those were from the early 2000s. Um, from those experiences, though, he was such a great guy, really intelligent, informative, and followed his dreams, which is fantastic. I mean,
Yeah,
such an interesting gentleman, such an interesting gentleman. Um, he was when we first took over as the CS Legion for the campaign series for Matrix. He was very helpful, even though he's doing his own thing, etc., etc. He was still helpful with us, which was great. Uh, he helped us with the until Berto came along, who is our programmer and the geez, holy, I can't say enough how lucky we are to have Berto as our lead programmer because
Oh yeah. As we wrap up soon, I want you to give shout outs to all these guys.
yeah, for sure. Anyways, he was able to help Berto at least get started to, you know, understanding what he had done with the original campaign series and how we could change it to improve it. So yeah, without John Tiller, we wouldn't be here. Simple as that.
I, you know, so I followed him from Talonsoft to I believe he's with HPS for a while. Um, he's been with Matrix. His games have for quite some time. And now they've morphed into WDS. There is not one single game that is bad. Now, there's games I think I play more than others. Yell at me for this one. He never put out a bad game. I can't
No,
think of any.
no. The subject matter that he's chosen for the games that he's developed, they're all good. Completely. I agree.
Do you play any of his games when he was with JTS? Um, his campaign series that he had. Um,
I
you
have
know,
a I have a couple of the Panzer campaign series that I will dabble in every once in a while. Like for example, Smolensk 41. I'm a huge fan of Smolensk. The battles around Smolensk, so that was a must-have for me for sure.
I think the Panzer campaigns are amazing. The Panzer battles is one of the most underrated group up games that I think that are out there. There's three of them that are out, but you can get the demo from WDS, and it takes it a step lower where you have platoons, companies. It's more of a battalion up to a regiment fight. Amazing. He really was so innovative. And at a war game at Marine Corps University, I met one of the guys that worked on a ton of his games, and couldn't say enough great things about John Tiller. And it's even though he's gone, his impression or his footprint in this community, I think, will last. I can't see talking about PC games without his name coming up one way or another.
No, absolutely. You are right.
Yeah, he's awesome, and I'm sure he knew about the Vietnam game coming out too, and I think this is also going to be a classic. So now I'll totally go fanboy on you.
And that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I thank God you can't see my face because I'm beaming, and I hate that because I have more games to play based on what we just talked about. Um, I think the system was always amazing. I think it gave you challenges, but just playing the two versions of Vietnam, I think it's an insta classic. I think it's a game that pushes that engine into new places, and some of it I didn't even realize till we talked today. So my bad on that. That starting with the second version of the Arab Israeli game, and now this version of this game, I just I think it's going to be one that I think gamers will really enjoy. I think the challenge is there, and knowing what you just said about the game, I'm like, not that we try to keep these to an hour, but I'm guess what I'm going to be doing 2 minutes after we get off. Well, I'm going to edit this podcast to go out because I want people to hear it, but I'm definitely going to dive back into this game. I just think that you guys did an amazing job. I think the 108 scenarios is hours of fun.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the community will love this game. You
I
know,
think the biggest hurdle will be people will look at it and think it's just a rehash of the original series, and it's
it's
so
not.
not. It's not at all. It looks, like I said before, it looks familiar, but it's a whole new experience. Absolutely it is.
It's like buying a new version of your favorite shoe. It is. It's the same comfort, but the engineering is totally different. And I think this game really hit it out of the park. Um,
I appreciate
sometimes you no, I mean you look for 10 years of work. Thank you. I'll say thank you. And I think a lot of folks out there will as well. But we know you didn't do it alone.
No,
Um,
absolutely not. Without the team,
so
there was no
let
game.
let's throw out some names of the team. If we miss anybody, just send me an audio recording of their names, and we'll see if we can add it later. But tell us about your team. First of all, how big is that team?
It's not very big. It's a pretty small team. It's 10-ish people. Um, and as we have a very extremely well, we just don't have a development budget. Everyone is doing this in their own time, which is fantastic. Another reason why it takes so long to do this. Um, the core of the team is certainly Berto, uh, Robert Osterland. He's our programmer. He has done all the magic to make the game what it is now. It is, there's not enough thanks for him and all of his efforts to make the game what it is today. It really is fantastic. I'm so happy. Um, we also have Petri, who does the 2D graphics as well as some scripting and scenario design. He's keen on the Eastern Front. His passion is the Finnish battles because he is Finnish. We have Christopher Osterlund, which is Berto's son, who he redid the 3D graphics for us for Vietnam. He's been doing some promo videos. He's been doing, yeah, so many things. He's graphics and PR and things like that. Such a great guy.
You
Um,
know, it's just
David
interesting. Yeah,
Galster.
yeah. Sorry, who?
David Galster, he did the French scenarios. He developed them. Petri scripted them. Um, I think he's pretty well known within the gaming community
I think
for
he is.
designing scenarios. Yes. We have our testers, John and David. Huge thanks to them and dealing with our constant updates to the beta and redoing things again. Um, yeah, without them, just not possible. As well as Mike Bracken and Mike Amos. Mike Amos developed a lot of the 3D units, and Mike Bracken did some testing for us as well.
Who was the guy that I think put us in touch? Where I made a comment that the game's amazing, and he was like, "How'd you find out?" I said, "Well, you know, uh, we're tight with Slitherine Matrix."
I think
He
that
was
was
awesome.
yeah, I think that was Dave or John, one of the two. One of the two
Yeah,
testers. Yeah.
yeah. Just talking to them really kind of made me excited about this game. I'm really excited about it. The interesting thing was you go through this team that 10 years, 10 people, a lot of work, but once again, it's not Gary Grisby's War in the East. I
No.
find it easy to play. I find it very challenging, and I'm going to leave you with the last word. Um, but before that, thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome. Um, I can't wait to edit this and get this out there. People need to hear about this game. But before I turn it back to Sean in the studio, I'll give you some last thoughts there, sir.
And thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest. I'm so happy to continue babbling on about this, and I appreciate the opportunity for that. Thank you.
Oh
Thank you so
no, no problem. Look, we'll probably end up battling a little bit. People always go like, "What do you guys talk about afterwards?" And I go, "Well, that's for me to know." And maybe we're talking bad about you. I said, and people get really upset about that. But Jason, thank you so very much for this. The game will be out on the 20th, and I
Yes.
believe it is through Slitherine Matrix Games website. I don't think it's coming through Steam.
No, I don't think it's going through Steam as well. It will be through Matrix. The product page is on the Matrix site. We
Yep.
also, if you go to cslegion.com, we have a page there where you can access that page as well.
And don't forget, folks, to hit the forums. These guys are so responsive in the forums, and throw on the No Dice No Glory Facebook page or the forums because we have a whole thing on computer games that what you guys thought of the game. I think that you're going to be impressed. I'm curious to know how you do in your first few games
Yeah.
because I didn't do that well, and I'm
Me
going to
too.
play. I'm going to play Ben Trey. I'm going to do Long Tan. So yeah, it's going to be a rough few days. I'm hoping for more snow, my friend. So I have no reason to go outside, but I'm going to turn it back to Sean in the studio, and we'll wrap up here. But once again, sir, thank you very much.
Yeah,
The game
thank
will be
you.
out the 20th. Check the link below and pick this game up. And back to you, Sean.
Thanks so much for joining the show tonight. Remember to follow us on Twitter at No Dice, No Glory, and keep the conversation going on NoDiceNoGlory.com, now featuring our own message boards. Have a great night, everybody.